If you are a wealth building kind of person who is out here trying to build an empire, that empire is subject to division. Everything that you create after you get married is potentially, a marital asset. And so you need to be thinking about how you're going to protect those things, not just in the event of death, because obviously that's going to happen to all of us. But if you're going to get married, divorce is one of those things that can really impact you financially as well.
Hey, journeyers. Welcome back to the Journey to Launch podcast. Today in the rocket seat, I have Jannese Torres. She's been on the podcast before. I actually should have looked up your episode number, Jannese, but I failed to do that. We will link that in the episode show notes. But I'm really excited to have Jannese on because she is an award-winning Latina money expert. She became an accidental entrepreneur after losing her job, but she has created a successful Latin food blog, Delicious Delights, and now she's helping her clients and community build online businesses that allow them to pursue financial independence and freedom. She's on a mission to educate marginalized communities on topics like entrepreneurship, investing, and financial independence. And her new book, Financially Lit, is coming out. It probably will be out like the same week this comes out. And I'm so excited for her to be on the show, to be back on the show, to talk about everything that's happened since she's been on, which has been a lot. And so Jannese, welcome back. Welcome back.
Thank you, Jamila, for having me. It's so good to be back.
Well, so I think I said this in your original interview that, I just love your just realness when you talked, even before you got your book deal or before we talk about what's happened in your life, just like in the beginning of your journey, sharing kind of like and being really bold with your thoughts about being an independent woman and creating a business. And by the way, her episode that she's been on before was episode 212. I just looked it up. But I want to hear a little bit of your backstory. So we don't have to go all the way in that because they can go back and listen to the original episode, but just really like that 2-minute elevator spiel of kind of where you came from and what you're doing now.
Absolutely. So this was not part of the plan. I like to tell people that I was not planning to be a personal finance podcaster and now an author. Money was something that intimidated me as a first-gen kid. I'm Latina. My parents didn't teach me anything about money other than the importance of working hard to get it. So I got the prescription of success from them, which was go to school, get a degree, get a job. Hopefully they have a pension and you work there. You don't change jobs. You just work there for 45 years and you retire. And I found myself in my late 20s feeling like I had been lied to, that this was not the recipe to success. And that began my entire personal finance journey where I discovered the FIRE movement, I discovered entrepreneurship, and I discovered kind of an alternate life that I could have if I just decided to go the path less traveled. And it started a whole cascade effect, which has led me here to this point that I have now written a money book.
Yes, that will be out. But so when you were first on the podcast, I remember talking, you were married. I mean, let's just go there.
Yeah. So I was kind of doing all the things that we are supposed to do in life, and that went alongside with my personal life. So I married my college boyfriend. We bought a house. Like we were doing all the things that like you're supposed to do. And I actually ended up selling that house because I realized I don't want to be a homeowner. It's just not fit for my personality. And I ended up getting a divorce because I realized that marriage was absolutely toxic. And it's funny because so many of these really important life decisions that we're asked to make, we're being asked to make them very young before we even decide or even understand like who we are as people, right? Like there's this pressure to get married and find your person and buy the house and do all these things, like, because if you haven't done them by 30, you're somehow like a complete failure at life. And now, approaching 40, I'm realizing we are not equipped to be making decisions like taking on $100,000 of student loans at 18 and deciding what we want to do for the rest of our lives and who we should want to be with. There's just so many things that I've realized we need to put into question. And so getting married was one of those things that I didn't really put a lot of thought into. Is this person going to be a good partner for life? It's just like, no, I mean, we're together. We just get married. That's just what we do. And now I'm asking folks to like really get introspective about a lot of the decisions that they make because they have a huge impact on your finances, and marriage is one of those things.
Yeah. And listen, you're so right with when we ask kids what they want to be when they grow up or declaring a major and then all the financial responsibilities and then being committed, which I get there's a place for some of that, depending on who the person is. And even that, I think who you are at 18 and even 28 and even 38 changes as you collect more information, and especially with a partner. So, as someone who's
Hmm.
been with my partner, my husband, since college, it's like there are a lot of changes that happen. Like now we
Right.
are 40. So, meeting someone at 19 and now, like, that's a lot of changes that you go through with a person, and
Yeah.
their maturity is different, or what they like or dislike. And so, for you, I think for some people, leaving something that is not good for them or just not working is hard, especially when
Yeah.
it's so. I'm assuming your family's very integrated. Like, it's kind of like, how do you walk away from that? Because so many people are staying because it's comfortable or because they're afraid of all the repercussions that come with it.
Yeah, it's so true. It's kind of like, it's the devil you know versus the devil you don't. And I think a lot of people just get into a place where like they're comfortable with the chaos and it's not necessarily like enticing for them to go and find out what else could be out there because the chaos feels like familiar, right? And so for me, I was kind of just like, and I think this is a script that I had in my head from just watching other couples and like family members. There was like a lot of toxic relationships and like extended family. And so I was like, well, marriage is just supposed to be chaotic. Like, this is just what we do. You fight, you make up, you accept bad behavior and you justify it and you stay together because that's just what we're told. And the idea of divorce is still a very taboo topic in a lot of communities of color. When you talk about things like prenups, I mean, people get so triggered. They're just like, why would you even mention that? It's like you're planning to get divorced if you bring up this topic. And I think that taboo is what keeps a lot of people stuck. It keeps a lot of people complacent, and it keeps a lot of people potentially in abusive relationships. Because one of the startling statistics that I found when I was writing my book was this idea that 99% of abuse cases involve some sort of financial abuse. So you think about like how many people are stuck in relationships because they don't have the financial means to get out. It's scary. And this is why we need to normalize these conversations. But it's not easy to dismantle your life. It's not easy to get a divorce. It's not easy to break up a family, right? And I think for me, I had to get to a place where I knew that what was currently going on was not something that I was willing to accept anymore. It just was not okay. I was dealing with infidelity. I was dealing with financial infidelity and actual infidelity. Like, there was just a lot of things going on that I'm like, if this was my daughter, like, would I be okay with who she has become in this relationship? Would I be okay with this person being with my kid? And you just have to ask yourself those really hard questions that make you confront the things that you don't necessarily want to confront. But it's the same thing that you would do with your money, right? If you know something's not going right, if you continue to ignore it, it's going to get worse. And that first look at really what is happening here and realizing like where you have the power to make these changes, that's how we go from, broke to financial freedom. And it's the same way that you get out of a toxic relationship.
For you, what were the financial steps or implications from like leaving?
Yeah. So luckily, I was in a situation where I kind of like was able to plan my exit. It wasn't a situation where my immediate safety was in jeopardy and I had to kind of just like, pull the parachute out and jump. So before I even got divorced, as I was making the transition from working in corporate to working for myself as a full time entrepreneur, I met with a CFP. And my CFP did a review of my finances. And one of the questions that came up was, do you have a prenup? And I said, no. It was something I was planning on doing, but the chaos of like planning a wedding just kind of fell by the wayside. And she said, well, I'm going to need you to get a postnuptial agreement, which is like not something I even knew existed. And she's like, I need you to get that done before you transition to full time entrepreneurship because you're building an asset here. You're building something that is subject to divorce proceedings. This business could be something that you potentially have to sell in order to give your, potential ex half of the value of it. There's a lot of implications when you're building wealth in a marriage. And so I did the postnuptial agreement, met with an attorney, got that whole thing squared away, and like 18 months later, I had to execute on that. So I was like, thank God for, financial professionals who are out here looking out for you. But also, one of the things that I did in the entirety of the marriage was I kept my finances separate because my ex husband and we had completely different philosophies on money. He was like a spender, didn't want to save. Retirement is just like one of those things you don't even think about, always in debt, just getting into a lot of issues. And I was like, well, I don't move like that. And I don't feel comfortable with my money kind of just disappearing because that's how you operate. And so we always kept separate bank accounts, which I was like very grateful for in the divorce, that I didn't have to go and have my bank accounts locked up and, not having access to money, because when I got divorced because of the postnup, I didn't have to pay any alimony. I didn't have to give him anything from my retirement accounts, nothing from my business. It cost me $500 to get divorced, and I was able to move on with my life in 3 months versus other folks, who can be going through this for years and potentially having 6-7 figures worth of financial repercussions to deal with it.
Okay, I have questions.
Most people usually do.
At the time, right? So I'm assuming maybe things were just like okay with your relationship at the time that you went with the CFP, and she told you, she gave you that advice. I think the biggest fear for some people is now approaching their partner after everything's okay, like we're good. Why are you approaching me about a postnup now? How did that conversation go, and how did you get him to sign it? Because I feel like there would be some pushback from some people.
Yeah. So I think one of the big things that was helpful is the fact that we did operate with like different financial, accounts and stuff like that. So there was never this feeling of like, I'm entitled to your stuff. We kept things separate. And so I think it was very natural to just kind of formalize that. And I also took the opportunity to default the responsibility or decision on the CFP. I was like, well, she said I'm making a risk by taking on this project that's a business. There's financial implications of that. I don't want you to be subject to, potential bankruptcy or something that could happen with my stuff. So it's in your best interest as well as mine to just like, let's make sure we're separating things out. God forbid something goes wrong, you're not liable for anything, and vice versa. So I think you just have to be rational about it and make sure that the person understands what they have to gain from it versus it just being that stereotypical conversation of like, well, I don't want you to have anything because, I don't trust you, or just the things that we see in movies where it's like there's someone in power who's trying to take advantage of someone with less power. That's not what it's about.
Right. Very smart. And using the current, scenario, which was truly happening, you leaving your job, you starting to build this business, to frame it in that way that, hey, I want you to be protected too. And I think also is the fact that you were honest with yourself, and what the state of the relationship was, that you guys had different spending alignments. Because I don't know if at that moment, even though you had the post not done, you thought you'd be leaving like soon after. But I think
subconsciously, maybe.
yeah.
I feel like now looking back, I'm like, girl, the universe was just pushing you in the direction you needed to go in and made you do some things. But I think it's just like you want to have these conversations when there is not that friction, because that's when things are not going to go right.
Right, but I feel like so many people like try to ignore those signs and ignore, like, they want things to be so good. I was on my run this morning. I love listening to Dateline, which I probably shouldn't because it makes me think everyone is gonna do something to me. But I was running and listening to the story, and long story short, like, the husband was cheating on her and literally like was leaving, and like she knew this and was just like, well, I'm not leaving, so you can do, you can be with me if you want. And he would like leave to go with the other woman and all this stuff. He ended up doing some horrific stuff to the other person, and I'm just like, and she was still like, well, I thought like things could work. And I'm just like, but like, he literally told you and showed you like what kind of person like he was, and you still just wanted it to be a way. And so this is no like victim blaming, but I just feel like there's so many of us who want what we want and refuse to, or just are scared to do something different. But like, if we do that, it like puts us in such a safer place, even if you don't do it immediately, but like just making certain decisions help you out in the long run.
Yeah, and I think that's when it's important to rely on your support system, right? Because you can be blinded by what's going on in front of you, especially if it's like around you all the time. like I said, it can become very normal. And sometimes you do need those outside perspectives, whether it's from your friends, your family, therapist, like whoever you can get to give you that ear to listen. You know, somebody with an objective perspective is going to be able to hear your story and be like, well, what you're going through is not okay. And I can't make the decision for you to get out of that, but I want you to know, this is just not okay. And you do with that what information you will. And so when I started really sharing things with my family and my close friends about like what was going on, it was just everybody's like, girl, like it's time to go, and sometimes you just kind
Yeah.
of need that reinforcement and to know that you're going to be supported through the transition because it's very scary. I had friends offer to come and work from home with me while I was going through the divorce just so I wasn't alone. My sister came down and spent a month with me. So it's just like rallying the troops and really reminding yourself that you are not alone in the situation and there are a lot of people that care about you, but you have to let them in on what's happening and let them support you. I think it's really important.
I think just to highlight the importance of, if you feel like you need a postnup, if you're already married, or even a prenup, just so we know how important it was that you had it. What could have happened if you didn't?
Oh gosh. I mean, everything that I've worked to build, my multiple six-figure investment portfolio, my business, the fact that I wrote a book, like book royalties are subject to divorce. Like it's crazy how much you can be losing through this process, right? If you are a wealth building kind of person who is out here trying to build an empire, that empire is subject to division. Everything that you create after you get married is potentially, a marital asset. And so if you even think that you want to do stuff like, building a big investment portfolio, pursue financial independence, start a business, you need to be thinking about how you're going to protect those things, not just in the event of death, because obviously that's going to happen to all of us. But if you're going to get married, divorce is one of those things that can really impact you financially as well.
Yeah. So that was a big life change for you. I know there have been other things that have changed, and I'd love to like kind of dive into that. I know the first time you were on the show, you talked about the first experience of buying a home and how it actually wasn't for you. You did not enjoy it. And we talked about like the pros and cons of that. But you did have a different experience. And so I'd love for you to dive into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things that I wanted to touch on in my book was this concept of values based spending. And we hear about that from folks like Ramit Sethi and a lot of folks in the financial independence space. It's kind of just like, make sure that you're moving with your money in a way that's actually aligned with the life that you want to create. So the first time that I bought a house, it was very much just trying to like check off another thing on the box. This narrative of like renting is a waste of money. You're being dumb if you don't buy a house. I had all this pressure to do it. And so I said, well, I got to do this by the time I'm 30, right? Because life is over after 30. So I bought the house, completely miserable experience. I didn't enjoy it. I was broke all the time. I didn't have money to fix the things that went wrong. I ended up selling the house at a loss. And the whole journey was just a big wake up call that I was kind of living in autopilot with my money. And so I said, the second time around, when I do this again, I'm going to do it on my own terms. I'm going to do it when I'm in a place financially that it makes sense for me. I'm going to buy a house in a place I actually enjoy being in, which I did not do the first time. And I'm going to use the opportunity to potentially create an asset as well. And so I ended up, right after my divorce, it was like a gift to myself because I was able to save all my money. I bought myself a condo in Puerto Rico. So a beachfront condo, about 30 minutes from the capital. It's a city that I go to like all the time when I was there anyway. And I bought it in cash in my own name. And I was like, this thing is going to now represent this amazing life transition that I've had. And every time I'm here, I get to celebrate like everything that I've created, everything that I've built. And I was in a financial position to do it. I now use it as an investment property. So it's a vacation rental when I'm not using it. My family is there right now enjoying themselves. And it's been this incredibly different experience from the first time around because I approached it with a completely different mindset, with a completely different financial situation. And it just represents something that really is aligned with like what matters to me versus the first time around, which is just, it's this thing you're just supposed to do as a responsible adult.
Mm. Well, so for you, as someone like, because you're Puerto Rican, right?
Yeah.
And so buying something in Puerto Rico, I feel like there are a lot of people, especially entrepreneurs, online business owners, like making this like surge and talking about moving to Puerto Rico and all these things, and wonder how, like, how as a Puerto Rican native, like how that feels for you, and ethically, like, are there things people should be considering? Because bringing this up also as a transition to talk about like this, the location independent lifestyle, and how so many people talk about, oh, move to somewhere that's low cost or another country, and
Yeah.
oftentimes even, moving to maybe even third world countries where the that exchange rate is, you can get more bang for your buck, but it's also like not necessarily great for the natives that are there or the
Yeah.
people there to make a living. And so it's like we're doing the same thing like that we don't want people to do to us in our land, like almost colonizing it. So talk a bit about that and what
Yeah. I have a
the
lot of feelings
implications.
about
Yeah.
this. I have a lot of feelings about this because I have seen both, the quality of life improvement that can come from remote work and, using things like geo arbitrage. I think it's an essential part of how I was able to pursue financial independence because I moved from New Jersey to Florida in that journey and was able to save a substantial amount of money on taxes and just cost of living. So I'm not opposed to people moving to different places in the world, but I am opposed to doing it in a way that's like exploitive, right? And so one of the things that's unique about Puerto Rico is that for people that move there, they can potentially have a huge tax savings because it's written into the law that, you can exploit the tax laws if you're an entrepreneur or a high income earner. There's folks who moved onto the island in droves after Hurricane Maria. So after 2017, we had a bunch of people in the crypto industry, online entrepreneurship, et cetera. And what's been happening is that the island has been kind of going through this like second colonization where there are entire neighborhoods that have been kind of walled off from the natives. They're cutting off people's access to public beaches. These folks are taking advantage of a system that is not built to help the local natives, right? Because if you're not paying taxes, you're not contributing to the infrastructure, you're not contributing to the island's progress, and it feels very much just like a situation of haves and have-nots. And the thing that frustrates me about this situation is that native Puerto Ricans who live on the island cannot take advantage of these tax breaks. So if like my family who lives on the island wanted to do this, they would have to move to the United States, live here for 15 years, and then go back and take advantage of those opportunities. Right? So it's a system that is absolutely not built to equally give advantages to folks. And I have issues with that. I have issues with especially people who like don't have a genuine connection to the island of just hearing, well, Puerto Rico is a great tax haven, so I'm just going to move there. It's I don't like it. I'm not a fan. I've actively called out folks in our sphere of influence that have done that, and it's something that it's frustrating, but it's not the only place in the world that it's happening. So, I think it's just one of those things we have to continue to bring awareness to and make sure that we, as online entrepreneurs and like as folks who are building wealth, especially in communities of color, are now not becoming the next like wave of colonizers because that is just so problematic in so many different ways.
Right. Do you know of any like changes or moves, like people advocating for laws to change to help benefit, the island and people there from the windfall that people are making off of the island by moving there?
Yeah, there's a lot of protests on the island. Like you'll see a lot of folks kind of taking to the streets. There's a lot of graffiti that is protesting this stuff. Like folks will do like sit-ins at construction sites. They'll be advocating at city hall and with like their local representatives. So it's a big problem on the island. And one of the things too that's contributing is the cost of living has gone up dramatically because these folks are coming in with a ton of money. They want higher end real estate. So they're buying up a lot of property to establish residency. They're buying up a lot of property to also invest. And they're making it so that folks who live on the island can no longer afford housing. It's very much like similar to what's happening on the mainland United States, where we had like a bunch of hedge funds buying up single family homes, driving up the cost of housing. And now there's a shortage in place. So, it has a lot of like long term repercussions that I think folks need to be really mindful of how they're going to plan to not be a part of the problem if they're making this move.
For you, what does that look like? Because it can be very easy for you to, you do own something there, but
Yeah.
where do you balance now living and working? I know, I feel like a couple maybe years ago, or I think there was talk of you online maybe moving. But where are you now, and what does your work life or balance look like?
Yeah, so I've toyed back and forth with moving to the island, but honestly, for me, the infrastructure situation is not something that's very sustainable for an online business owner. For example, like it's very common for the internet to go out. It's very common for the electricity to go out, and it's not even because there's a storm. It's just like it just happens. The infrastructure on the island is very old and has not been updated. So it's one of these things where like I cannot afford for my internet to just be continuously going in and out. A lot of business owners that are on the island have like two or three forms of internet service. They'll have like a hotspot, they'll have like satellite internet, they'll have like cable internet. And for me, I'm just like, it's all too complicated for me. And I don't want to put myself in a situation where I'm like making it harder to do business for some tax breaks. Like for me, it's just like, that's not worth it. Um, but also, I just think I want the ability to be closer to family. Like I most of my family is still here in the States. And so I'm not really comfortable in a situation where like I'm going even further away from them. But again, everybody has a right to their decision making. I just think if you're gonna go to Puerto Rico, please don't let it just be because you want to take advantage of tax breaks. Like make sure you have a plan to actually contribute to the island, to like appreciate the culture, to not be just somebody who's out here like taking advantage of a community that has been exploited for so long. Because if we become those people, like we're just kind of perpetuating the things that have been done to our ancestors. And like, what the hell was the point of all this if that's the case?
Right. And that's the ugly truth, I feel like, of capitalism is that
Yeah.
I don't know that there is, I think there's different levels of it in terms of being ethical, but I don't think you can make it um, and become wealthy without you can't do it without participating in
Yeah.
capitalism. But there's so much wrong with capitalism because it is a hierarchy and a haves and have not, and I don't have a solution, and of what to do differently. Can be more conscious and hopefully bring conversations like this to listeners, to both our audience, to as they want to build wealth and by any means get their family right, but also thinking about what does it look like for if we looked out more for each other
Mhm.
and in a way that we all are okay. Like it doesn't have to be where we are dominating and taking advantage of another group. But I do find
Absolutely.
that it's hard. Like just it's a broken system that we almost choose to participate in. I feel like we have to in a certain sense,
Yeah.
but it's just a real conversation that needs to be
Yeah.
had.
Well, and I think this is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about entrepreneurship, right? Because if we think about what is fueling capitalism, it is entrepreneurship, it is business. And so I think like the more that we have people of color in positions of power as like owners of their own companies, like we can be the change that we wish to see in the sense of you can create a culture in your company that promotes people of color, that pays people a living wage, that gives parents paid paternity leave, and that fixes so many of these systemic issues. When you do it from the top down, you have the potential to create real impact. Yeah, it might be like a couple people at the beginning, right? When you're first starting out your company, but there are ripple effects of being that person who can lead change from within. And so that's why I think it's so important for us to consider, how can we use the tool of entrepreneurship to change the system from within? We need money to have power in capitalism, but we can also create change with that money. And I think that's the important conversation to have.
For you, I know you have a lot of great information in your book, Financially Lit, that people can pick up. But I'd love for you to pull out some of what you find. I mean, I had this experience writing my book. It's like it was my chance to synthesize and put together all the frameworks and things the way I saw finances and the journey to financial independence. Finally, like on piece of paper, like I got to conceptualize and write it down. And so for you with your book, what are some of the key insights that you want to share or you think it's going to be helpful for someone just even listening and they can gain a lot from right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So you'll find in the book, lots of the standard advice around like budgeting and saving and investing. But one of the things that I think gets missed in a lot of personal finance books is both acknowledging your mental health and the aspect that plays with your money, and also the emotions that come when you've made it to the other side. I don't think I hear enough people talking about like, what do we do with all the feelings that come up once we have built the wealth, once we have become successful, once we've quote unquote like made it out of the hood, right? Because it's easy to understand like how that can change your life in a very finite, tactical way. Like, yeah, I'm going to have more money. I'm not going to have to worry about things. I'm going to be able to like go order guacamole, as you say, like, order the extra guac all the time. But there's a lot of baggage that comes with you being the only one that's made it out and seeing all the people that you grew up with, your community, still back there in the struggle. And what I find is that for a lot of people like myself and like you, who we are the ones who've made it out, we have this immense sense of guilt about what we've been able to accomplish, this idea of like wealth guilt. And it can create a lot of self-sabotaging self-sabotaging activities and like things that we do to kind of make ourselves not feel so guilty. So like giving all your money away, or like just treating everybody to the point where like you're depleting your own financial security, or just like you start to repel money almost because it's just like, I don't like how this feels. I don't want this. I'm not going to go pursue this salary increase because then I'm going to make even more money. And then my family's going to talk crap because now I have a new car and they're going to be like, look at you with your first world problems. Like there's so many things that come with it. And it's all stems from this feeling of like the further we get along in our wealth journey, it's like the further we get away from the community that told us that this is what we should do because this is what success is. So it's kind of like this endless loop that happens. And so I dedicated an entire chapter of this book to that conversation because there's so many feelings that come up when you are the one who made it out.
I love that. And, talking about that, like even just privilege, right? We all have varying levels, I think, of privilege. And uh, when I'm thinking about kind of like what our ancestors and people did before us to get us to this position, and then now, for me, having children and them hopefully being in a better position, and then they won't squander away like what we have helped them build or what we built. It's like sometimes you'll hear people say, oh, well, she had help, or this happened for them. And it's like, isn't that the point? Like, isn't the point to be able to help our kids? I feel like there are mixed messages sometimes where the guilt, and maybe, there's a tinge of jealousy with people who maybe
Mm,
didn't have the certain help that you have had, or what your children may, or nieces and nephew may have in the future. And it feels like, well, I got to get it out the mud because like, that's when people can respect me. I feel like there's this level of, the nepotism that we see kind of like in Hollywood where people are like, oh, they only got that role because of that, where
mhm.
it's like partly, and if the person is, being a brat and not acknowledging that privilege, you can be upset at that person. But isn't part of what we're working on, all of us to have wealth, is so that whether it's our children or people in our communities, that we are helping them and giving them a privilege of nepotism in a way, but still having them earn it.
Absolutely.
So I think there's a conversation around that needs to be had too.
Yeah, I think that's one of those things too where, it's nice for other communities to be able to say, well, I built my millions, I think Bill Gates is one of these guys who's just like, I'm just going to spend all my money and it's up to my kids to like, recreate that, whatever. We can't afford that. Like we're already starting from the bottom. You know what I mean? So I always tell people like, why it's so important for us to have these nuanced conversations where we are talking about like culture and the aspect that it has on your finances is because we're all being asked to pursue the American dream, but with different budgets, right? So like Latinas get 55 cents to a white man's dollar. How much do black women make,
Less than
compared to
that,
a white
yeah.
man? So it's just like we're being asked to accomplish all of these things without the same level of access to resources, privilege, opportunities. And it's just like, no, if I know that me being a Latina woman, I have basically 50% of the budget, I have a responsibility to set aside some of this money that I'm able to get so that the next generation is not starting from that place. They're starting at the same starting line as everybody else. And, maybe we'll get to a place hopefully where parity exists and the wage gap will no longer be a thing. But until that's a real conversation, we need to do what we can to set up the next generation for even more success than we were able to achieve.
Right. And being confident and proud of that. It's like that's why
Absolutely.
I'm always, I'll call out like any help that I've gotten and, share sacrifices my mom made to put me in the position. Like, yes, she gave me a percentage of my first down payment for my condo,
Yeah.
and feeling proud. Like, I feel like we should be proud of that. Like, we should be celebrated. Like, yes, like it's a great thing that you worked in this company and was able to get an internship for your niece or your friend's kid because of that, because
Right.
that's happening all the time, on the other
All
side.
the time. Absolutely.
So tell me a bit about mindset. I know that's like a big part of your work and my work too, but it's just feeling worthy of the success that we have. And I know we talked a bit about why that might not be the case, kind of that survivor's
Yeah.
guilt of making it. And so what are some of the things that we can do to, or people can do listening, to know that they're worth it, to know that
Yeah.
like whatever success is coming their way, whatever they have now, they deserve it, without feeling like they've left their community behind or they sold out or they're no longer in touch.
Mm. Well, I think first and foremost, most of us need to be in therapy because we definitely have like money trauma that we've experienced in some way, shape, or form. The way that you feel about money is likely because of what you saw growing up in your community or from your caretakers. So I think it's important to uncover those internalized money stories, those narratives. And I have an exercise in the book to help you start to ask yourself some questions that will help you get to the root of like why you feel a certain way about money. Sometimes it can be religious based. If you grew up in a household that was like very much, kind of glorifying, if you will, like the poverty that came with like Jesus's path, and like he didn't need anything, so like you shouldn't need anything, you shouldn't want for anything. If you want, wealth, that makes you a bad person. Maybe you heard that like rich people are evil. There's like so many things that you don't even know are influencing how you feel about money. And so getting to the root of those beliefs, I think, is super important, whether you do personal development work or you work with a therapist. I love the fact that now there's like financial trauma coaches and just people who specialize in this because it's a real thing. And then I think it's also just you kind of have to continuously work on the mindset. I don't think people understand that, like, even when you've made it, there's other things that are going to come up. When you hit your first million in your investment accounts, you're going to just be freaking out that it's going to disappear. And then you're going to start telling yourself, well, maybe I should make it two because two's better than one. And then 10's better than 20. Like it's just always going to be this endless loop of kind of this fear of losing it all, especially if you're the first one to be able to do this. And I think it's like being able to like recognize those emotions almost as like characters in a play. And they don't necessarily have to be involved in your story, but you recognize that they show up at different stages. You're going to start to understand like what are those things that are triggering you? Where is that coming from? And you'll become more familiar with like the emotions and you'll be able
Right.
to identify them. You're like, oh, wow, there you are, scarcity. There you are telling me that there's no way I'm going to have another 6-figure year in business because everything that I did was a fluke. It was all just luck. You kind of have to remind yourself of like all of the things that you have done to get to the place that you are. None of this is luck, y'all. Some of it is like maybe good timing, but most of it is just you being intentional about what you're doing and like you keep doing it. And so I think it's important for most of us to remind ourselves like how far we've come, give yourself that perspective and realize that like you did that and nobody else can
Yeah.
take it away from you.
Yeah, it's one of the things I really like about your content is the confidence like you exude, and for yourself now, right? So your book is out or coming out depending on when this releases. I'm pretty sure it's going to be like right around that time when people hear this. But in your entrepreneurship journey, right? Like I know you're on the path to financial independence. And so you talked about like some people look at 1 million, they're like, "Oh, what about 2 million or 2 mil? I should do 4 million." And there is a level, what I call the guac levels of what you desire, the lifestyle and how much you
Right.
need. So for you, where are you on your path, right? Like what is your enough point? Do you feel like you're reaching a point or not even close to where you feel like I want to slow down, like, and I don't want to do this? Or do you envision wanting to do this to continue to build wealth? Like, what is your end goal?
I've been asking myself that question a lot because I think there's this thing that happens when we get on social media and we start being sucked up by the comparison trap of just like, well, look at this other person who's like making $10 million a year. Like I should be doing that. I'm like in year 11 of entrepreneurship. And I had to really come back to myself and ask myself, like, why did I do all of this? Did I do all of this to create some big empire where I'm employing 50 people and making, 10, 15, $20 million a year? No. I just wanted to replace my salary and be able to work whenever I want to on the things that I'm excited about, take time off if I want to, work from anywhere. And I already get to live that life every day. So I feel like I've already reached my successful definition of financial independence, even though I don't have $1 million in my investment accounts. I don't make seven figures a year. I have everything that I need and more. My retirement is already set because I did pursue Coast Fire. And so that's ready to go. Like if I want to just retire at traditional retirement age, that's all set. I have enough passive income streams to not work at this moment. And so it's just, I get to wake up every day, define what that day is going to look like, work on the things I'm excited about, travel whenever I want. And that for me is the true definition of financial freedom. And so I've reached it.
Yeah. So I'm glad you're acknowledging that too. I think realizing like where you are and how far you've come, but also that enough point. And it's not that you can't
Mm-hmm.
have more. It's not that you might not, you might change your mind and say, you know what, maybe I'll push a little harder in this aspect of my life. But I think it's a great place to be, to feel comfortable if things stay the same and or improve. It's like you
Yeah.
won, right? Like it's either way. If things don't, even if I don't make any more, if I continue at this pace, like I'm fine. And I find that that is the true benefit of the pursuit, is that you're forced to do a lot of things up front to get yourself in a financially better position, like pay off the debt, use your skill sets to earn you money. And but after kind of get through that, and you're working on yourself continuously, because like you said, that
Yeah.
doesn't stop. Then you know that that self-reflection, that awareness is very important, so that like, are you pushing for a life that's really not the life you want, and causing more stress and putting yourself on another hamster wheel. Maybe you stepped off the corporate hamster wheel, but now you're on the financial independence or entrepreneurship hamster wheel, because you don't really know what it is, that you've reached your sweet spot, but you just want more.
Yeah. That self-reflection I think is so important. And I had to remind myself, like, I've been grinding at this for years. And at some point I need to give myself permission to, like you said, step off of that hamster wheel and go and like enjoy the fruits of my labor. So now I'm focusing on the intangible things like my relationships, my health, just like curating that life outside of the accomplishments and the accolades and the money and the titles, because those are the things that we are told we should care about. And a lot of that stuff that really matters, like your family, like your health, that stuff can fall by the wayside for a lot of people, especially in this pursuit. And I did make sacrifices. I've made plenty of sacrifices in a lot of different areas. And now I'm ready to just say, you know what? This is not that time anymore. This is the time to reflect and to really reap the benefits of everything that I've sowed.
Love that. Jannese, please tell people where they can find your new book and more about you if they want to follow you.
Absolutely. So the book, Financially Lit, The Modern Latina's Guide to Level Up Your Dinero and Become Financially Poderosa, is available wherever you purchase books. You can order it at financiallylitbook.com. There is also an accompanying audiobook that I'm so excited for folks to tune into. And I'm also going to be going on a book tour. You can find those details again on that website. And I'm so excited to see folks in person and help everybody get financially lit.
So exciting. Congratulations on the new book. I know that was not an easy feat, but you did it. And I can't wait to continue to cheer you on. So congrats.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jamila.